Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete, joined as always by Ricardo Martinez-Paz, and we have something today that we have not had since week one of the regular season. We've got an episode where both of these teams won a game. That's what I'm talking about. Steelers are back on track. Eagles continue to dominate. We're fired up. We're excited about it. I'm certainly excited about it. Ricardo, how you feeling? I know you're also fired up after that rivalry win. Come on, tell me about it.
Oh, dude, it was so huge. Obviously, I was watching with you, and I was like, "Oh my god!" You saw every emotion coming out of me. It was like, "Screw you, Dallas!" Like, I mean, it felt good to get a win for Jalen Hurts, especially and Nick Sirianni, to get that win, that statement win that they desperately needed against the Cowboys that they didn't get last year. But yeah, fired up, 6-0 going into the bye. So great stuff.
I mean, both of these teams. I think we even talked about it a little bit. It was really like a big. Certainly for the Eagles, it was their biggest game of the season, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And for the Steelers also, it's like we're in the midst of that 4-game stretch that we continually talked about. That was going to be, frankly, just extremely tough. And the Buccaneers was one of the games that definitely felt like it was, if they're going to win a game in this 4-game stretch here, this was one that they could potentially get, and they came away with the victory. And, we'll get all right into it. But I got to say, we've been starting with the bad. We've been starting with the Steelers a lot these last couple episodes. So given both these teams won, I'm going to let you do the honors, and we'll start with the Eagles today. Does that sound all right?
Okay, yeah, sounds good to me, man. All right, I guess I'll just let it rip. But yeah, Sunday Night Football. I mean, on the biggest stage, really in Philly. I mean, this stage was set. Really, you had all the stars. You had Meek Mill pulling up to that. Oh my goodness! Like I told you before.
I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson even like that. I even read an article this morning that he was like dancing on the sideline before the game started because he's like a huge Meek Mill fan.
Yeah, and then he on the interception he gave the ball to Meek, which is also sick.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, so the stars are showing out that night. Embiid was there too. Shout out Joel Embiid. Sixers start tonight. So first takeaway, defense forced 3 turnovers. Well, I literally said in the last episode, you got a first turnover on Cooper Rush. He didn't throw an interception prior to this game. At this game, he had 3. I mean, they were all huge momentum changers. It's like I knew Cooper Rush wasn't all that. Like I said, it almost came to bite me in the ass in the end where I said that you have to put the ball in Cooper Rush's hands. But yeah, so there were 3 straight drives with a turnover. The first one, James Bradbury picked the pass, first interception. And then C.J. Gardner-Johnson was there to pick it off, and that's the play where he gave. That's after the play where he gave the ball to Meek Mill, and so that led to a touchdown to put us up 14-0. The very next drive, defense forced a turnover on downs. The Dallas was on their own 35, and they went for it on like 4th and inches and didn't get it. So then that led to 3 more points, so 17-0. And then the next drive for the Cowboys, Darius Slay picked off Cooper Rush. I mean, he was the funny thing about that though was that Darius Slay was going backwards on the play, but regardless, he still made the interception. That led to another 3 points. It was 20-0 at that point. So I mean, and then
you were exactly right on this though, in that like I like you distinctly said. Last week when we were filming, the key for this Eagles team is to just put the ball in Cooper Rush's hand and let him try to beat you. And, for the most part, I'm just looking back at the schedule now since he took over. I mean, Cincinnati, Giants, Washington, Rams, Eagles. Like, the Rams have a good defense, but it was really the Cowboys defense that won them that game. Yeah. This was really the toughest defense that Cooper Rush had to face. And for an Eagles team that I believe is leading the league in interceptions at this point, or is it takeaways? Yeah, they're leading the league in takeaways at this point. I mean, they certainly showed it this week against Cooper Rush.
Yeah, that's now 14 turnovers for us. I mean, the last interception was, that was a key play too. Brandon Graham got a hit on Cooper Rush, obviously affected the pass. CeeDee Lamb was wide open. He honestly could have walked in for a touchdown, but because of that hit, it was an underthrown pass, and Gardner-Johnson was there to pick it off and kind of put the game away, really. And so at that point, it was 26-17. Eagles had the ball, really just had to convert first downs, and they did that. And so Yeah. Again, this defense, like it's always like someone different making plays. It's incredible how talented this defense really is and how well the secondary is playing. I mean, before the season, we said that was going to be like, at least especially the safety spot. Um, that was going to be a big sort of question mark going into the season. And then obviously the trade for Gardner Johnson seems to be paying off a bit more. He has 3 interceptions on the season. Um, and he had 4 tackles, and he came out of the game. I forgot to mention he was injured. He injured his hand while trying to strip the ball out of a Cowboys player. Um, and he finished the game with 4 tackles, 2 passes defense, and 2 obviously critical interceptions. So I mean, he's also my player of the game. I'll say that now. But again, it's just crazy
This
how
this
well this
Eagles
team's playing.
this Eagles defense absolutely has been playing like really ever since that first week, which, again, that was something we talked about early on was the rust and, not tackling during training camp. Maybe it's something where it was just as simple as that, where week one, they were just working out some of the kinks. You brought in a lot of new pieces on top of not tackling. And that was why the Lions put up so many points. But since then, they have absolutely played like one of the best defenses in the NFL. And certainly to have that you can rely on even when the offense maybe isn't firing on all cylinders is certainly a nice safety net that this Eagles team has.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good transition point. You talked about the offense. I mean, again, the same thing that we've been seeing all season really is that the Eagles explode in the second quarter. They scored 20 points to be exact. Um, and then after, and in the third quarter, they didn't score any points. Their drive stalled out. Again, this sort of familiar thing that we've been seeing all season in every single game. They just struggle to score in the third quarter, but ultimately, the rushing attack helped them in the end to score on that final scoring drive they had. They ran the ball 10 out of 13 plays on that drive, on that scoring drive before.
Just enforcing their will.
Yeah, like I don't know why it took them this long to do that. Like I don't know. Everyone knew that the pass defense was obviously the best part of. The best like asset of this Dallas defense. The run game is a bit weaker than that. So I thought that at least in the second half, the Eagles would have exploited that a bit more. It took way too long to get that. I mean, literally the Cowboys were within 3 points before the Eagles actually mustered that scoring drive up.
I wanted to ask you because we like you said, it was 20-3 coming out of halftime, and then the Eagles go to the Cowboys go ahead, score 2 touchdowns, and next thing you know, it's a 3-point game, and then from there, the Eagles were kind of able to take things over on the ground. But how nervous were you getting? Because the Eagles literally in the third quarter went a drive of 4 plays and punt, 5 plays and punt, and then next thing you know, Dallas is scoring their second touchdown, and the Eagles offense hasn't done anything since the first half. I mean, how are you feeling at 20-17 at that point, having the Cowboys just 3 points away?
Yeah, so I remember, watching with you. I was like, the Eagles cannot settle for 3. They like 3 points is not going to be enough. I said they have to score a touchdown, and that's exactly what they did. So yeah, I was a bit nervous watching. I mean, seeing that the lead was down to 3. I was more just annoyed because I know how good this offense is. We all know how good the offense can be, and yet here they are not scoring on any of their drives in the third quarter. So I'm just like, why? What gives? Like, why do they just not? Are they not good at adjusting or like making adjustments at halftime or something? Like I don't understand why this continues to be
It's
an issue.
almost like they come out flat because they always have these big second quarter leads, and then they come out
Yeah,
flat. And this is something that you've talked about before, is that you haven't had that wire to wire kind of victory yet, where
yeah.
it's like you feel like, okay, they've just literally dominated from start to finish. But at the end of the day, they're still doing enough. So I don't know. Where do you feel at this point about just the way that this offense has performed as a whole? I guess.
Right. I mean, man, it's like I like what the offense is doing. Don't get me wrong about that. Like that, they're doing a lot better than what they did last year. It seems. I mean, Jalen Hurts is obviously a big reason for that. AJ Brown, obviously, huge addition. Um, I mean, as a unit, I think they're doing well. It's just when it comes to those like you said, they come out of the third or the half a bit flat-footed. It's just like that to me is
It's
where I
frustrating.
know yeah, it's very frustrating. I know they can improve on it, and I sort of was going to say for my next takeaway that they sort of have to work on it, like a lot, because this is yeah, the Eagles don't have the toughest schedule from like here on out, other than like maybe the Packers and Cowboys again, really. Um, but like when it comes like at this point, assuming they're making the playoffs, but like when it comes to the playoffs, you're not going to have these kinds of leads, and you're not going to be able to like it's just like unsustainable if you can't come out of the half scoring. You're like at least extending drive is like that's they've just been struggling with that all season long. So I mean, it has to be worked on.
I feel I get what you're saying, but I also think that part of it too that has to make you so excited about the way this team has performed is the fact that I think it says something about a team when they constantly find ways to win. And when you're
Yeah,
faced with adversity, I mean, the Cowboys scoring on back-to-back drives, all of a sudden it's like, well, what's this Eagles offense going to do? The fact that you can then turn around and string together a 13-play drive to then really, put the game back up to a two-possession game. I think it says a lot about the makeup of the team and the fact that when they do face adversity within a game, they've been able to respond really week in and week out. And now you're seeing it against a Cowboys team that you could make the case that the Cowboys are a top 3 team in the NFC right now. And the
yeah,
Eagles just went out and did that. Now, obviously, I think the Cowboys reach a different level when Dak Prescott is healthy. But nonetheless, this defense is extremely talented. And, they were able to kind of enforce their will. And I think we're both kind of on the same wavelength that, you kind of want to see them rely a little bit more on their run in situations where they kind of have that lead. I mean, Miles Sanders at this point has really kind of proved everybody wrong so far to this season. He's 4th in the NFL in rushing yards to this point, and you've also got kind of the three-headed monster behind him with Boston Scott when healthy and Kenneth Gainwell, and of course the rushing ability of Jalen Hurts. So I mean, I think to kind of go behind your talented offensive line, get your running backs going, get the running game going, and kind of just still have a balanced attack. It's certainly something that I think you're right, the Eagles can improve upon, but the fact that when the time comes and they need to kind of kick it into another gear, they've been able to deal with that adversity and do so, I think is big for this offense.
right. I mean, it's like you said. I mean, they always find a way to win it, and as we've been saying all season, really, when one unit's not performing that well, the other one steps up. Like that's like I love that about this team. Like genuinely, like that's something that it lacks last year. I mean, it's clear like I'm more passion, like more fire. I don't know. It's just like the message is being received amongst the team. It's just like I love the energy overall. I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm just pointing out like one sort of thing that definitely needs to be worked on.
Yeah,
But
something you're concerned
it's
about.
yeah,
Well,
it's something that may not hold up.
you also brought up the point about, well, in the playoffs, you're going to have these close games. And I'm not discounting that at all. But when you talk, like, I want to ask you, what team in the NFC are you worried about? Genuinely, what team in the NFC are you worried about that you're like, man, if we run into this team in the playoffs, they'll be tough to deal with. Because as far as I see, this NFC is so wide open, and the Eagles are so clearly as a unit, as an entire roster, better than anybody else they're gonna have to deal with. I see them as the easy favorites for the NFC at this point. And I'm not afraid
Right.
to go out and say I see them making the Super Bowl. And I think a big part of it is just because of how deep their roster's been and how disappointing some of these other teams are. Don't get me wrong, there will be teams that'll give them some tough competition. But at this stage in the season, I truly see them as the 100% pure NFC favorite in that conference.
Yeah, no, I also do. I would say the only team that really I'd be concerned about is, I mean, maybe the Cowboys, especially because within the division, it's just like, I mean, the fact they've been able to win without Dak Prescott. I mean, Cooper Rush obviously losing his first start yesterday or 2 nights ago. I mean, it says something about the team as a whole, really. I mean, that's something that, um, like
Well,
I would definitely keep an eye on them if
but
it for some reason came down to like an NFC championship and it's Dallas in Philly or something like that, and it's like that would get me a bit nervous. But for the rest of
well,
the NFC, it's a bit
yeah.
it's
Here,
like
here we
very
go.
mediocre right now.
Let's do this real quick. Division by division. You tell me what teams scare you here. NFC South, The Buccaneers and Falcons are currently tied for first place.
Yes.
Do any teams in that division scare you? Buccaneers coming off of a loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I mean, the Bucks defense is about it, but offensively, they've not been good at all. I mean, you're going to talk about that, obviously.
They've been extremely disappointing. I really don't see them as a major threat to make a deep run in the playoffs. I don't want to discount Tom Brady, and obviously they can still turn things around. But I mean, like they're just one of those teams where they just don't do it for me at this point. The fact that their offense is this dysfunctional, and we'll get into the Bucks a little bit later. But then in the NFC North, you beat the Vikings. The Packers seem to be taking a little bit of a step back. I mean, do either of those teams concern you?
Not really, not particularly at this moment in time. Not really.
Again, I don't want to discount the Packers. And
Exactly.
I think that the three teams that have really disappointed this year in the NFC are the Bucks, the Packers, and the Rams.
Yes.
The Buccaneers, the Buccaneers. The Packers are the team of those three that I think has the best chance to turn things around. I think with Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur, they've been there for a while, working together collectively. I don't know how long David Bakhtiari, what kind of his status has been if he's fully back healthy. I don't even know if he's actually been playing yet, but their offensive line is going to get better. I still think that's the team I kind of see going out and getting Odell Beckham Jr. when he gets healthy. So they're the team I could see potentially figuring things out. But, outside of that, I think the Vikings are a very fluky 5-1. And then, I mean, let's talk about the West real quick. I just said I don't buy into the Rams. The 49ers, I think, are a really good team, really well coached. But every year, it seems like they have a plethora of injuries. And you know what? Unless they're fully healthy, Jimmy Garoppolo isn't good enough to take a banged-up 49ers team on a deep run. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that.
So, I mean, that kind of leaves what you were saying in the NFC East, no? I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts of the Giants? You talked about the Cowboys potentially being a threat when Prescott's healthy. What do you think of the Giants? I know you're going to get into the Giants in a little bit, so maybe you want to save that. But
I mean, it's definitely impressive. I mean, they're building a pretty good culture there under Dable, so I'll give credit where it's due. As much as I hate the NFC East division rivals, but yeah, I'll get more into that a bit more, but it's definitely been very impressive that they've, especially the last 2 weeks, the last 2 wins they've had, very impressive, just all around, really.
I think it just kind of circles back to the point of like this Eagles team is really sitting in a nice position at this point, and we'll get into kind of assessing where they're at, given that they're going to the bye a little bit later. But do you have anything else specific from this Cowboys game that you want to bring up as well?
Let's see. I already said different play. Yeah, I mean the only thing really is just during the bye they got to work on playing the full 4 quarters. That's what I see. I mean, otherwise they're the only undefeated team. They're doing pretty damn well. So
they are doing pretty damn well, and having that bye week, extra week to prepare and work on things, it's only going to benefit them. So that being said, we'll move on to the Steelers now, and. Man, coming off of a victory for the first time in a while, it feels good. It feels good. And I gotta say, a ton of credit has to go to the amount of fight, the amount of grit, the amount of just bounce back ability, not giving up on the season, not packing things in that came into this. Going into this game, being down Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, your top 3 corners. DeMarvin Leal, your young defensive end who's looking like a young stud, down all these players, all these starters on your defense, and they come out with backups, third stringers, and find a way to get this victory against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Extremely impressive. I think the defensive line stepped up big time, which was a major reason for this. As a whole, they had 4 tackles for losses, 5 QB hits, and 2 sacks. Larry Ogunjobi was my player of the game. I thought he was just a disruptor all day. He was on the injured report all week long with a back injury that he sustained last week against the Bills. He came out and in my opinion was the biggest disruptor on the defensive line. 5 tackles, 1 of them for a loss, 2 QB hits. We also saw Cam Hayward bounce back nicely. This was a guy I critiqued a little bit for not having a big enough impact given TJ Watt's hurt. He was the guy you would have kind of leaned on to step up, and he did so in this game. 3 tackles, a sack, a tackle for a loss, and 2 QB hits. The Steelers rushed 4 guys all game. They got in the backfield. They disrupted Tom Brady. They held Leonard Fournette in check against the run. I believe they kept him under 70 yards on the day rushing. They allowed the secondary to drop into coverage. They had the extra guy dropping back because they were only rushing 4, and it was a game plan really crafted by their defensive coordinator Austin that worked to perfection and held the Bucks in check. And like I said, a lot of credit has to go to guys like Josh Jackson, Arthur Maulette, James Pierre, guys, Trey Norwood, guys who don't normally get the opportunity, but they stepped up when called upon with the leadership of guys like Miles Jack and Terrell Edmonds, who came in, did their job, played well as a unit, and really just shut the Bucks down for a good portion of this game. So to see them kind of band together as a team, band together as a defensive unit was a great sight, and I'm really happy that the Steelers team was rewarded with the victory.
Yeah, dude, that was one hell of a win. That's a win that I was not expecting at all, even before the season, even and going into this week too. I was like, man, I knew it was going to be low scoring, but I was like, I don't know if the Steelers have enough, especially with all the injuries. But that's such an impressive win. I mean, you can never count Mike Tomlin teams out ever. Like, that's just, I don't know, just overall, that's just as impressive a win as it gets, really.
Really, I think a ton of the credit has to go to Mike Tomlin and Austin in the coaching performance, and even Flores to a certain extent, helping out with the defense as well and concocting that game plan. Because, to do it with kind of the personnel that they had available was extremely impressive. And, I also think it's one of those things where, I thought that the spread was a bit heavy. I think the Buccaneers were sitting like 8-9 points favorites all week. They may have even gotten up to 10 at one point. And, that was one that I was even thinking like, man, they're really giving the Bucks a big time. They're favoring the Bucks a lot in this situation.
Yeah.
When, but the reason that I was kind of like, what, maybe it's fair because of how banged up they were in the secondary. But then you saw it was really questionable to me. I get that the Steelers were dropping, they were dropping 7 guys back into coverage. Yeah, 7 guys back into coverage. So, I get that some wide receivers are going to be double teamed and everything, but you'd think they still would have taken some shots against the inexperienced corners like James Pierre and Josh Jackson. So for them to not do that, I thought really kind of played into exactly what the Steelers were trying to do on defense. And the one other thing where I feel like the Buccaneers really kind of shot themselves in the foot, 4 for 14 on third down. Steelers played really well when they had to get stops, and the Buccaneers weren't able to convert, even, preventing some third and short, fourth and short opportunities where the Buccaneers tried to just, pick up 1 yard and keep the drive going. The Steelers were able to come up with stops. So, again, I can't heap enough praise onto this Steelers defense to shut down the Buccaneers. And yeah, they were able to kind of just put together a perfect game plan to slow down Tom Brady.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, geez, Tom Brady looked mortal out there. I mean, he's been showing it all season, but in this game especially, I mean, he's just, and also the comments he made are like him absolutely obliterated, like just ripping into the offensive line. I mean, that just shows you how well this defense played against him, especially with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, like the inexperienced corners going up against them.
Well, I wanted to ask you, too, what'd you make of Tom Brady yelling at his offensive lineman mid-game?
I mean, I don't know. That seems like a typical Tom Brady thing to do when he's just like really like infuriated. That's like he does that to try and like get him to play better, to fire him up a bit. I mean, it's obviously a bit of frustration, but not sure that really works out in the end. I don't know if this is accurate, but someone was saying that what was it? It was like I didn't leave my wife and kids just to lose to Kenny F and Pickett or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't know if he actually said that, but I'll say this as well. Like, Tom Brady, you were at Robert Kraft's wedding. You missed your Friday practice. The wedding was Saturday, and then you fly into Pittsburgh for this game. Like, the offensive line didn't play great, and I just talked about how disruptive the defensive line was. Really just dominating that point of attack. But still, like, I don't know if Tom Brady really can be in the position there when you're not around your teammates, the 2 days leading up to the game. I think that's something where if I'm an offensive lineman, I'm saying, hey, I know you've won 7 Super Bowls, but, what the hell are you getting on me for when you're not even coming to our Friday practice before this game? So I think there's a lot of dysfunction that's going on in Tampa Bay right now. I think Todd Bowles is the head coach. I like Todd Bowles. I like his football mind, but I don't think that he has quite the same grasp, at least to this point of the season, that maybe Bruce Arians had of that locker room. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I talked about this earlier. They're a team that certainly underperformed, and they're one that I don't know if I really. Again, I don't want to doubt Tom Brady, but I don't know if they're a team that's really destined to turn it around here. Their division is so weak that I still expect them to make the playoffs, but with where this seems to be at, and Tom Brady's heart doesn't seem to be fully invested. Todd Bowles, his first year as the head coach down there. I don't know. Some things just don't seem to be clicking for me. And each week that passes is just another week that they go by without seeming to figure things out. And the Steelers were able to benefit and pull out a win, a big time win to bring them to 2-4. Really big, and they'll head into Miami now this next week. But I want to move on to some of my other points real quick.
Yeah.
A lot of credit has to go to Mitch Trubisky. A ton of credit has to go to Mitch Trubisky. Kenny Pickett goes into the concussion protocol about halfway through the game, out for the remainder. Mitch Trubisky's called upon, and you know what? A ton of credit has to be given to him to step in. He went 9 for 12, 144 yards. He led a touchdown drive, and also the thing that has to really that I heap the praise on is it's one thing to kind of come in and be able to coast your team to a victory. But the fact that he stayed ready as a backup, given that he was replaced week 4 when he was named a captain at the start of this year, has his job taken away week 4. The fans wanted him out of there really from his first game in Pittsburgh. But he stayed ready for his opportunity. And when his number was finally called upon, he came in there, answered the bell, and led this team to a victory. So I give him a ton of credit. And really, even on that final drive, to have the bad snap, be able to recover the ball, and then come back on, I think it was like 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12, and deliver the strike to Chase Claypool to pick up the first down. That was the play of the game that really it didn't seal the win, but really to be able to continue to run off the clock was so huge. So I love what I saw from him to come in and kind of man the ship. Mike Tomlin said, hey, if Kenny Pickett is good to go, there's no QB controversy. It'll be Kenny Pickett in there at starting quarterback. But, I just the personality of Mitchell Trubisky to not huff and puff about being replaced by the rookie really shows a lot about his character. And you know what? He's very deserving of having a job in this National Football League. Maybe not as a starter, but I think he showed you a lot of what his makeup is, what his DNA is, to be able to stay in there and stay ready and really do what's best for the team when it was his time to lead this team.
Yeah, showed he was more than capable of doing his job. I mean, yeah, that's the kind of person he is, like that. I mean, that's the kind of quality you want really in a QB, even if he is a backup. I mean, yeah, even if he's not a starter, he's still a quality backup to have. I mean, he stepped in and did what he had to do for the injured Pickett. So credit to him for coming in and almost not missing a beat, really.
I mean, really, what he did. I even said this in my post game Instagram post where we give our breakdowns or our key takeaways. If not for his performance, the Steelers probably would have lost that game. His single-handed performance to lead the touchdown drives, make some big-time completions. It was huge what he was able to come in and just man this offense when Kenny Pickett went down. There's no QB controversy. I've already heard people say it. I've had friends ask me, well, if Mitch Trubisky, plays this week, could he potentially be the starter? I've read some beat reporters that have said, oh, maybe there's a controversy. No. It's Kenny Pickett's team. This guy's the future of your franchise. You drafted him in the first round. He's a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky. I'm sorry, Mitch Trubisky. Hey, I just talked about for the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, all the praise that I'm giving him. But Kenny Pickett is the starter if he's ready to go. I don't want to hear any controversy about who the starter of the Steelers offense, who the starting quarterback of the Steelers offense should be.
Yeah, never a question really in my mind either. So,
the last point I wanted to make, and this was just not a major point, but really, the Steelers' punt and kick return game has, kind of been a struggle at all points in this season. They had to not move on from Gunnar Olszewski, but they moved off of Olszewski and kind of moved him into a different role on the special teams, not returning kicks anymore, which is disappointing because you paid him to come in and be the return man. But Steve Sims in this game, he had 6 total returns, combining both punt and kick returns for 135 net yards. His long kickoff return was the 89-yard return. Ultimately, the offense had to settle for a field goal, which was disappointing, but also he had a 24-yard punt return. So, hey, maybe if you can get some consistency out of him in the return game, that'll be big for this offense. You like what you see from him, and hopefully he can keep it going. And I imagine after this performance, they'll kind of hope to get some consistency out of him, and he can kind of be that guy that does it week in and week out. Remember 2 weeks ago, he was actually set against the Bills to be the kick return guy, but he had that like weird eye thing that affected his vision right before kickoff, so he wasn't able to do so. So maybe we're kind of getting a look into what Steve Sims can do, and he'll kind of be in this role going forward and can provide some consistency there.
Yeah, I mean, he showed the potential he has. I mean, some big returns that obviously set up the offense in good field position. So I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you stick with him for at least for now? When he's
I mean they're definitely going to. Hopefully you can just get I'm not saying you're expecting to rattle off 80-yard kick returns every week, but just to get something positive, because it has been a struggle in that department for the Steelers to this point this season.
Yeah, for sure.
So that being said, let's you know what? One other thing I wanted to touch on real quick. I don't know if you saw this video, but as the Steelers were heading back into the locker room post game, there was a video of Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin embracing, and then Chris Boswell is believed to have said, "Not because of you," after the win. Did you see this video?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so after the video, it was him potentially saying, about the win, not because of you. And people thought he was directing it towards Matt Canada. I just want to go on record and say I don't think it was Chris Boswell directing it towards Canada. When Canada and Tomlin embraced, they did it right before they went to the locker room. Then there was like 5 guys in between where Chris Boswell was. Could have totally been related to some other conversation he was having with someone.
Yeah.
And also, why would Chris Boswell, the kicker, even start any beef with Matt Canada at that point? So, and coming off of the win, that's not really the time that you'd call it. After a victory, I don't think anybody would really be calling out Matt Canada, especially on the team at that point. So, I just wanted to kind of go on record and say I don't think that was related, and I think that was kind of misinterpreted a lot by the fans who saw it that way. So, I just wanted to go on record with that, and I think Chris Boswell was referring to someone else. But
probably, yeah.
I'm still on the train. I'm not going to jump on the guy because we got the victory this week, but Matt Canada's days in Pittsburgh are still numbered, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, but still, a win's a win, I guess. So take it.
So, yeah, absolutely. You take every win you can get in the National Football League, however it comes. That being said, we got the Eagles on a bye this week, and we got the Steelers going down to Miami. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to preview the game first, or do we want to just talk about the Eagles and where the NFC East division's at first?
I say we keep going with the Steelers because they have a game.
Let's rock with the Steelers, then we'll close things out with the Eagles in their bye week. So I will say this is another game that, it's winnable to a certain extent for the Steelers. Now, I have to say, this is a Steelers team that I think is better than people gave them credit for, and to come in and kind of beat the Buccaneers in the fashion that they did this last week, I think that the Steelers are perfectly capable of beating the Dolphins, all things considered. It's a Sunday night football game, so they don't have to worry about the sideline heat down in Miami, which is a big advantage for the Dolphins during day games. I mean, it's no secret. I mean, I know people were talking about 30-degree difference between sidelines, but hey, if you're the Dolphins, you're obviously going to put the sideline of your opposition that's directly in the sun for the whole game in the heat. I mean, it's no question there. But Tua is expected to come back from the concussion injury. I don't know. Maybe he's a little rusty having a couple weeks off here. I think he's missed 3 games, 2 or 3 games now. So, it's certainly going to be a challenge, again, covering the dynamic wide receivers of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But, if this secondary is banged up again, I know Mike Tomlin said he expects Levi Wallace to be back. It's possible that Minka, Cam Sutton, and Ahkello Witherspoon are all back as well. But I think that you can kind of put in a similar game plan against the Buccaneers, against the Dolphins that you did against the Buccaneers. The Dolphins' offensive line is tied for 9th in sacks given up at 15 per StatMuse. So not too promising, giving up a lot of sacks per game. And that's what kind of gives me hope is if the Steelers can kind of do a similar thing where you get Larry Ogunjobi, Cam Hayward, Malik Reed, guys on the defensive line applying pressure to the quarterback, disrupting things in the backfield. I think that that's kind of a recipe for, rush 4 guys, create, havoc against the Dolphins offensive line, and just kind of drop 7 guys back into coverage and hope that you can keep Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle from beating you over top. I think that's kind of the formula you have to follow. the reason I also think that can work, this Dolphins team is third to last in rush yards per game
Yep.
this season. The Buccaneers were last in that stat. So again, I think it's kind of they can follow this same formula to have success on defense. Then it just becomes a matter of, whether it's Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky, manufacturing points. I think that's the formula you can kind of follow. So I think that this is a game that the Steelers can win if they can kind of concoct a similar game plan. Obviously, Brian Flores is going to be a part of that, along with Austin, the defensive coordinator, and Mike Tomlin, the head coach. So to me, this game is certainly a game that's within reach of a victory.
Yeah, I mean, talk about Brian Flores. He's going to be the most fired up out of everyone, out of all the coaches to win this game, especially after the fallout, with the Dolphins and all of that other drama that happened. But yeah, I mean, I think this matchup favors the Steelers almost a little bit because the Dolphins don't run the ball. They're not good at it. Their offensive line isn't that good. So, again, we could see the Steelers absolutely win. It's definitely a winnable game. And if, like you said, if Tua's rusty and, anything could happen, the Steelers could start getting some turnovers and all this stuff. So, we'll see about it, though. I truly believe the Steelers can win this, too.
The only thing that worries me is I do think that Tyreek Hill is on a little bit of a different tier than Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Maybe a tier above, in the fact that even just getting him the ball with a little bit of space, which even if it's just, 5-10 yards downfield, past the line of scrimmage, whether it's on a slant or just getting him the ball in space, I think he could potentially burn some of these corners if the Steelers are still banged up in the secondary. So, it's not like you really have to wait for plays to develop with him in the sense of targeting Mike Evans downfield. And I will also say Tom Brady was not on the same page as Chris Godwin. They left yards on the table against the Steelers last week when they could have easily converted some first downs. So that's kind of one thing I have my eye on. But again, if you can get Cam Sutton healthy or get Levi Wallace healthy to just kind of slow down Tyreek Hill a little bit, again, I think it's going to be a similar game plan of just you really need the defensive line of the Steelers to dominate the trenches. And like you said, Dolphins don't run the ball well. It's not what their bread and butter is. And if the Steelers can disrupt the passing game at all, get to Tua Tagovailoa, that's going to be key to just slow down this offense entirely. And I do think that's where the kind of the matchup is going to hinge there.
Yeah. You said it all there. So you don't really have much to add.
I don't really have much to add either. When I talk about where the Steelers team is at, and let me see if I can pull up their schedule real quick, because things do get a little tough here. And we've talked about this tough stretch. These 4 games that they've now, they lost one to the Bills, beat the Buccaneers. You're sitting at 2-4 now. There's a big difference. I don't want to look too far ahead other than going into the bye week. And Philadelphia is going to be a tough game. I'm not looking at that any differently. The Eagles coming off a bye week at home are certainly going to be favorites to win that game, and that's going to be a tough one to win. Kind of like the Bills. The Eagles are just a team on a different tier than the Steelers. But this is a Dolphins team that I feel is beatable. And if you can get this win, I think going into the Eagles game and then subsequently going into the bye with 3 wins rather than 2 wins is pretty huge for keeping within striking distance of a potential wild card slot. So this is a game, prime time, Sunday Night Football. I'd really love for them to be able to come away with a win here because I think it means so much more for their success on the season and being above 500 and being in striking distance of the playoffs versus losing this game and then having to deal with one of the best teams in the NFL in the Eagles next week.
Yeah, I hope Kenny Pickett's back for it, but obviously if not, then Trubisky's in.
I still think it's winnable if Trubisky's in there.
No, I think it is too. I just hope that. It would give him a little boost, if Pickett were back.
I hope he is as well. And I think Mike Tomlin even said in his press conference today, Pickett was practicing. He's still in the concussion protocol, but it was a promising sign that he was practicing already, obviously non-contact and everything. Yeah. But it's good that he was already back out there on the field. You hope that he can get through the protocol, but obviously given the recent string of concussions that the NFL has dealt with, surrounded by Tua Tagovailoa as well, if he's able to go, he'll be the quarterback. I hope he's the quarterback. I hope he's starting. I think the Steelers' offense is better with him in there. But I like where the Steelers are at coming off this victory, and I think they're playing with a little bit of an edge, a little bit of an attitude. And one of the keys for them is stringing together wins if they're really going to get back to it. And the Dolphins are a team that they could potentially do that against. So
Yeah.
I like where they're at. I like where they're sitting right now going into this game. I do like the matchup to a certain extent.
Yeah. I would be. I mean, I would be fairly excited and potentially winning this game.
There's some concerns. Hey, I'm not taking anything away from the Dolphins. They're a
No,
good team,
for sure.
but the opportunity is here for the Steelers to win as well. So
Yeah.
that's all I have on this matchup. And let's talk a little bit about the Eagles here.
Yeah.
Because they're now going into this bye week. And let's talk about just kind of where they're at, where our expectations were for them at this point of the bye week. You know, what we're kind of looking at going forward, and just what do we have to keep our eye on around the division now that, you know, they're sitting first in the division, sitting pretty. And yeah, I don't know. What do you kind of want to attack first here with where they're at?
I mean, that's an interesting question because, I mean, coming off their bye, they play what? The Steelers. They play
Home against the Steelers off the bye, yeah.
Yeah, then they play who is it?
In
after?
Houston.
In
I have their
Houston.
schedule right here. Then they're in Houston. Short week, Thursday night football game. But still, Houston's certainly beatable.
Yeah.
Then they have a Monday night rivalry game against Washington.
Yes.
And then
which Carson Wentz might not even play in.
Which Carson, you may be, you know, looking at Taylor Heineke or Sam Howell in that game.
Yeah.
And then they're in Indianapolis. That's their next stretch of 4 games there. So,
I mean, they're all very winnable games. Like, it's just like they could genuinely be 10-0. Like going into what? Who do they play after that? Is it the Packers?
At that point, then you go into, I believe that's then the week of Thanksgiving is the 11-27 matchup. Now I gotta say that they're home against Green Bay in that matchup, and I gotta say Green Bay, they have the next 5 weeks to really figure out what kind of all these teams, the Rams, Bucks, and Packers, who I've repeatedly said in this episode, they got stuff they got to figure out. They've been very disappointing. Like Thanksgiving is kind of when they got to like by Thanksgiving they got to figure out who they are. So I mean, by Thanksgiving, I think we'll kind of get a sense of where this Packers team is at. That could potentially be a huge week.
Yeah.
And then things do stiffen up a little bit. They got Packers, Titans, at the Giants. I believe the Giants are a playoff team in the NFC at this point.
Yeah.
But I mean that's certainly a tough little stretch of games, and then they're in Chicago, in Dallas to cap off a 3-game road trip.
Yeah.
Then you start to get into December and the end. Then you get towards the end of December and the end of the season. But I mean, from where we're sitting, Ricardo, I want to. Well, actually, no. I'll get your thoughts on that. I mean, I'm kind of in the same position as you. Do you think that there could be a trap game in these next 4? I don't want to go into kind of down the road into the Packers and Titans per se, but in these next 4, home versus Pittsburgh, Thursday night at Houston, home against Washington without Wentz possibly, and then at Indianapolis. Is there a trap game in there? What's the trap game that you could potentially foresee? Or is this team straight up just going to win all 4 of those games and go into Thanksgiving week, sit against the Packers in a big time game, sitting, and that's actually a Sunday night football game. They would then at that point be 6. They'd be 10-0 going into that Thanksgiving week Sunday night football against the Packers. Or is there a trap game in there?
I mean, the Steelers one definitely has potential. I mean, especially if the Steelers do win. I mean, they're going to be riding momentum against this Eagles team. That could be one. I feel like that one might be lower scoring than some people think. And then I guess the other one, really, the Colts. I mean, the Commanders aren't scary at all. They're not scaring anyone. Really, the Colts. They're a bit like they still have Jonathan Taylor. Matt Ryan, I mean, just had the best game of his season so far against the Jaguars. The defense is going to get healthier at that point. It's going to be healthier at that point. So that's a potential trap game there, potential loss there. But I still think they could win them all.
I think they can win them all too. I disagree with you a little bit because I maybe this is just because we're on like different sides of the aisle with Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. But like when I think about the Eagles being on a bye week now, all that extra time to prepare for Pittsburgh, they're at home. Obviously, the crowd's going to be fired up because it's kind of that Pennsylvania rivalry. I think they're going to come out and dominate Pittsburgh. And I think that the real trap game would be at Houston that following Thursday because you're on the short week. They may be riding the momentum of the Pittsburgh game. That's when I think that the real trap game could be. And, the Texans they're not good, but they're formidable. They can hold their own in games per se, especially if they can kind of put together a game plan. And at that point, if I'm the Eagles, I think I would just kind of rely on the run, rely on your running game to kind of go up against Houston. Again, Washington, I think we're both kind of in agreement is a joke at this point. But yeah, I think that Indianapolis is definitely a game you kind of have to watch out for too, because and they're an interesting team to kind of see if they can kind of build off their recent momentum, recent victories, and kind of assert themselves. They got a big game this week against the Titans to
Yeah.
kind of assert themselves in the South. But I don't know. The Houston game, I kind of have my eye on a little bit. But again, I think that the Eagles could conceivably win all four of these. I'd love for them. I don't want to say I'd love for them to win all four. I want Pittsburgh to win, that Week 8 game. But
Yes,
I
yeah.
would love. I think that would be a compelling storyline if the Packers can kind of right the ship a little bit and the Eagles continue to dominate going into that Thanksgiving week game.
Yeah, that would certainly be one hell of a game if that were the case. And if both those things happen, really, if the Eagles win out and they're 10-0 going into that game, and then the Packers figure it out. I mean, eventually they will. It's Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur. Like, they're going to figure it out. They typically do at that point of the season. So that one is, yeah, I think they should win these next four games. But
Well, I'll
yeah.
also say real quick, just because I know we want to get to the talking about the division a little bit, but also just looking back at like when we were previewing the start of the season, I know we were both toying around with the idea of potentially the Eagles going into the bye week at 6-0 with some tough games like Minnesota and Arizona and Dallas and even Jacksonville to a certain extent sprinkled in there. But the fact that it's now come to fruition and really their only really close game that they had to sweat out felt like Arizona, even though Detroit was close.
Yeah.
You didn't really have to sweat out that one so much. And even against Dallas, just when they started to face the adversity, they hammered out that long drive to go ahead. So I mean, to kind of meet the expectations here and go in 6-0, I mean, they've done everything you really could ask for at this point. No.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had them before the season going 4-2 into the bye, so already exceeded my expectations. But yeah, it's definitely. I mean, yeah, the favorites to win NFC East, favorites to win the entire NFC altogether. I mean, it's encouraging to watch and really just follow this team and see how much Jalen Hurts has developed and Nick Sirianni as well. I mean, just all the pieces sort of coming together and really just contributing to this 6-0 start.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, given where they're at now, they sit first in the division. And while we mention the division, let's talk about this kind of week 7 and what the implications are for the Eagles. I know you were talking about maybe some storylines or some topics that you had your eye on regarding, what's going on in the division or what's going around the NFC.
Yeah, so I mean, the Cowboys. I mean, I'll just go through the list of who the other teams play. The Cowboys play home against the Lions. The Commanders play against. Oh, I was just blanked on it. The Packers.
They're home
They play
against Green
the
Bay,
Packers. Yeah, and then the Giants against at Jacksonville. So I feel like really the only team that will lose is the Commanders. I mean, Heineke might honestly be better as a QB in terms of more of a game manager and not turning the ball over. And the Packers are a bit like struggling a bit, so that there could be a win there. So really, the storyline of that game is how will Heineke perform in place of Carson Wentz for the next 4 to 6 weeks after suffering that injury against the Bears. I mean, that was a terrible game altogether, but that the Carson Wentz injury certainly didn't help. So yeah, and then that I don't expect him to win that game. Really.
I agree with you. I expect them to lose, and I also think I expect Dallas to win. Given Dak Prescott coming back, the really interesting one though is that Giants Jaguars one. In my opinion, I think it's interesting.
It is.
Right?
Because the Giants are now they're coming off their third straight win. They beat the Bears first, then the Packers in London, and then this past week, the Ravens. I mean, you beat Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson. The defense stepped up on those final drives in both of those games. So who's to say they can't do it again against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are now coming off their second straight loss to a division rival? So they're not in the best place right now, or it might be
What
third
do you,
straight.
I'm
Actually,
really curious. What do you make of the Giants? Because coming into this season, the real threat to the Eagles or the real rival in the division of the talk was Eagles Cowboys, who's going to win the division, and now the Giants are sitting here second in the division at 5-1. Beating some real high quality teams. Do you view the Giants at all as a threat? Like I'm just curious what your perspective on them is. I'm excited for when the Eagles are finally going to get a shot to play them
yeah.
because I think that the Giants just still are. Their roster is still I truly think their roster is 2 years away from being a threat to win the division. But like I given the weakness of the NFC, I think that they're a playoff team this year. I said that last week on a different show, at the MCTV show that we do together.
Yeah.
I was on air and said I think that they're going to be a playoff team. But how do you view them? Do you see them as a threat at all? Like, is there any realm where they win this division and they really are just like that team?
I mean, they're certainly a bigger threat than they were, at least coming into the season. This team is just playing with like a chip on their shoulder, sort of edge, just like proving people wrong. Just like they're really, like I said before, they're kind of buying into Brian Dable's system, his coaching style. I mean, it's like, to me, it's hard to believe. It's just like, wow, this turnaround's happening so fast. I honestly expected them to have maybe 2 wins going into week 7. But here they are. I mean, 5-1, looking to improve to 6-1. I mean, it's at this point they could definitely make the playoffs, given how mediocre the rest of the NFC is.
I mean, I think at this
know.
point the fact that they're already up at 5 wins, I think you're going to see a team in the NFC get in with 8 wins. I think it's perfectly feasible for them to win at least 3 more games. So in my opinion, I think they're a playoff team.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
So
I still think like the Eagles overall as a roster is obviously much better.
oh,
So when it
I
comes to
definitely agree too.
yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely
just
agree.
like
The roster's better, and that's what I was trying to say is like this Giants team is still 2 years away from really. It's going
yeah,
to take 2 more off seasons to really get this roster to be a legitimate playoff threat to either win their division or just make a deep run. But
yeah.
let's play the hypothetical a little bit. Let's say that you get to let's say we're looking past this Sunday. What are all 3 of these teams doing this week? I feel like we kind of talked about it a little bit, but Dallas, are they're winning or losing this week?
They should win.
Giants winning or losing this week?
I think they win.
And the Washington, what are they doing this week?
They're gonna lose.
They're gonna lose. All right.
Yeah.
Washington is just the dumpster fire of this division.
Yeah, they've always kind of been, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at first, oh yeah, it's
For a while.
it's been a rough couple of years for them for a while. Yeah, even the year that they made the playoffs, Ron Rivera's first year, they still just barely scratched it. But
Yeah, almost a miracle they pulled off against the Bucs with Taylor Heineke. But anyway, it's a whole definite thing.
Any other final thoughts? Anything else you want to touch on related to anything before we wrap things up here?
Well, I mean, it would be nice if all 3 teams lost, but I don't think that's going to happen. But Eagles will keep flying. They'll keep flying high once they come back off the bye.
Hey, man, for as bad as the Steelers have looked in certain weeks, they're still just 1 game back. So, let's just have their division rivals keep losing. Let's have the Ravens keep randomly losing to the Giants. Let's have the Bengals and Browns keep losing.
I know, yeah, you love it.
All right, man, sounds good. Always a blast. That's going to do it for us on this episode. We're back talking every week. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out our Instagram where we're posting all the time, always giving our takeaways from what the Steelers and Eagles are doing week in and week out. That's all we got for today. Take care. Bye-bye now.